prefer to do a hard copy, you can do that. Still waiting on a few people, guys. You're wasting class time right now. Okay, here we go. Lesson 1A. Bro, you good? You good enough? Lesson 8's okay, so in lesson 1A, what we're going to be working on is, we've been working on graphs. I've been giving you pictures of graphs, and you've been kind of telling us what's going on in a graph, okay? Just kind of in your own words. So what we're going to do now is actually look at some parts of the graph, okay? To make sure that we understand all the little bits and pieces. And some of this stuff, like on the first one here, intercepts, isn't going to go away all year. You're going to see this in almost every single chapter. So the sooner you pick some of this up, the better off you'll be in the long run. Okay, so intercepts is going to be a big dog here. Okay, it's going to be really important for us. Okay, does anybody know what an intercept is? Monica?
Intersection is when two lines cross, or like, wait, I don't know how to describe it, but like, it's like, there's two lines and then they cross.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so an intersection would be like where two lines are crossing. Okay, Alex?
They run through the X and Y axis.
Okay, to be more specific, when we're talking about a graph, an XY graph, we're talking about the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Okay? So we're talking about where a line, so in this case here's a line, where a line crosses the x-axis, and then where does it cross the y-axis? That's what an intercept is. Okay? So, start off our notes here. The intercepts. Of a graph are pointed where the graph intersects an axis. The y-coordinate of the point at which the graph intersects the y-axis is called the y-intercept. Okay, the y-intercept. Okay, so when I come over here and I kind of take a look at this guy right here, this point would be called the y-intercept. Where does this line cross the y-axis? Okay, so now when you're looking at this coordinate point, okay, what's your x value always going to be here? 0, well not 0, 0, it's going to be 0 and then whatever my y value is, right? It'll move up and down depending on where it's at, okay? So your coordinate point will always start with 0 and then whatever y value we're currently at. So if I gave this just a random value of 2, it technically would be 0, 2. Does that make sense? Okay, so an intercept for us is always going to be a coordinate point. A coordinate point. Okay? All right. The next one we're going to talk about then will be the x-intercept. Okay? So the x-intercept. And when I come over here, that's obviously where it's going to be crossing the x-axis. Now, what do we know is true, going to be true about every x-intercept?
They cross through it with the X.
Okay, they're going to cross through the x-axis. And what about my coordinate point, though? What value is always going to be 0 here?
The Y.
The y. It's always going to be some sort of number, so some x value and 0. Okay? All right. The next words we have are linear versus nonlinear. This is review. What does linear mean? Linear. Okay, linear means a line. So linear function. The function is a line. Okay? And when I mean linear, it means it has one line. The whole thing is just a nice straight line. Okay, there's not parts that are lines and parts that are not. The whole thing's a line. So now nonlinear function would be what?
The function is not all.
Yeah, the function is not a line. Very good. It is not a line. So not. Okay, the next thing we're going to have to talk about is positive and negative. Okay? So when I'm looking at a graph, where do you think your graph is positive? Anybody got a theory? Yeah, on top. Nice job. Okay? So if I look here, like this orange, everything up here is positive. Okay? So anything that's above the x-axis is positive. Okay? So then what do you think we're probably going to do if we go below the x-axis?
Negative.
That's right. We're going to be negative. So everything down here is considered negative. Okay, so we have positive and negative. Okay? All right, so when I'm looking at this, the function is positive where its graph lies above the x-axis. Okay, so it's positive when it's above, and then it's going to be negative when it's below. Okay. So far we've talked about two things. We've talked about, well, three, but we've talked about the intercepts, where is it across the x and y axis. We have now talked about being positive versus being negative. Okay, now would you call this guy here, would he be a linear or non-linear on the top one here?
Non-linear. Linear.
I don't know, you tell me, is that a line or not a line?
Line.
Yeah, that would be a line, right? So that would be linear. What about the second guy down here? Would this be linear or non-linear?
No.
No, he's non-linear. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Okay, so now the next part we have is increasing versus decreasing. Okay, now this is different than positive and negative. Positive and negative is either it's on the top side or the bottom side. Okay, so if you're looking at this graph right here, is this graph positive, negative, both? What do you see here?
Positive.
Positive. Alex says positive. What do you think?
Positive.
Positive. Collins also go positive. Okay. Do we have anything graphed below this x-axis? Okay. So this entire guy, right, would be positive. Does that make sense? So the entire thing's positive. Okay. So now when we talk about increasing and decreasing, we're actually talking about the line now. Okay. So we're actually going to be looking at this guy. And if I look at this guy, is this whole thing increasing or decreasing when you read it from left to right? Going across this way.
Increase.
It's going up, right? Good, so it's increasing, okay? What about this guy? Increasing, decreasing? What's going on there?
Increase.
It's increasing to a point, right? What happens back here? Well, it just kind of levels off, right? Okay, so they're talking about the H1N1 virus, okay? The number of days since the outbreak. So they're saying here, early on, obviously day 0, there's no outbreak, and then all of a sudden, as the days start going, their outbreak increases, 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 and then finally it looks like it's tapering off, all right? At least it's hit the maximum where no more, I mean, these are the amount of people getting infected during this week, or day, depending on what we're looking at, in this case days, okay? All right, so if I look here, increasing, the function is increasing when it goes up, and decreasing when it goes down. And we are going to be reading these from left to right. Left to right. Okay, so we're just going to read your graph straight across like we just did. We're just going to read it across. Are we going up or down? And we are going to have some that are going to have both. Some that's going to increase and decrease. Okay? Qualitative versus quantitative. Anybody know this one?
I knew it.
You knew it?
I knew it.
Anybody? Okay. Qualitative. This is an example of qualitative. There's no numbers really associated with this. We've just got a kind of a generic line on a graph. Okay? Here, do you see how they've assigned all the numbers? That's quantitative. Okay? And here's how I remember the difference. If I look here, quantitative has an N in it. Okay? And N means number. Okay, I need to have numbers. That's the easiest way for me to remember it. Okay, so quantitative has numbers in it, has an N in it for numbers. Qualitative is just a sketch with no numbers, okay? So it was a lot of the sketches we did earlier in chapter 1 where you just sketched it, but we didn't really put numbers to it, okay? All right, so qualitative is the descriptive information not based on numbers. Not based on numbers. Okay? Qualitative is descriptive information that is based on numbers. Very good. Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions on this first stuff? Okay, so now let's actually look at an example of what we're going to be doing. Okay? Now, you've got these 5 steps that you are going to go through, and you're going to answer them. Okay? So your homework tonight, I'm only giving you 2 graphs. That's it. 2 graphs, but you're going to answer all 5 questions for each graph. Okay? So we're going to start with A, and A and B are kind of our easier ones. If I look at A, determine whether the function is linear or nonlinear. So, that's nonlinear, right? It's an arc. It's a parabola for those of you who might know that word. Okay? So for A, nonlinear. Jalen, right, let's go in. Okay, so for A, nonlinear. All right, so B, is this qualitative or quantitative? Someone besides Alex. Qualitative or quantitative? Zion, what do you think? Say that one more time for me. Quantitative, very good. It's got numbers, right? So we're looking for the end one. So quantitative. Okay, so like I said, the first 2 are pretty set. You just answer it's this or this. Okay? Now on C, this is where we got to start doing a little bit more thinking and we got to do a little bit of writing. Okay? It says, identify the X and Y intercept. Okay, that describe their meanings. So we're going to start with the x-intercept, and we're going to work through it. Okay? So now, does this graph cross or touch the x-axis anywhere? Alex says yeah. Well, but if I look here, if I'm looking at these points, is it not basically kind of showing it's crossing here and here? So we actually have 2 in this case, right? So every time it touches the x-axis, I'm going to write down that coordinate point. Now, we got to figure out, what number do you guys think this is out here? What would this line out here be?
250.
Pay attention to your numbers. So if you've got 80, a blank space, 240. What is it they may be counting by?
Kind of big.
By 80s, right? Okay, so if I look down here, this would be 160, and then I add 80 to it and get 240, and then Dalen just said add 80 to it and get 320. Okay, does that make sense? So sometimes you're going to have to figure out what the number should be. Same thing over here, except for it would be negative 320. Okay? Now, we are estimating this is not going to be perfect. So this isn't perfectly cross at negative 320 and positive 320, but it's pretty close. So we're just going to estimate it to be about there. Okay? So now, when I write my coordinate points,
0 and 320.
very good. I've got 0 and 320, and what would my other one be?
0 and
Negative 320. Very good. Okay, so you're going to write them down first. Now you're just going to talk about what it means, and don't overthink this. You literally are just going to say 0 means what? 320 means what? So if I look here, what does the 0 mean? What's going on when I'm doing 0?
That backwards.
Oh yeah, thanks. Mr. Davis was right. The guys, I put those backwards.
Hey, man, it's.
Oh, I know, it's going to be hard to erase. Sorry, guys. Well, that's what I'm here for. Make your life as difficult as possible. All right, so how about we try that? 320, 0, and negative 320, 0. Okay, so let's take a look. What is 320 and negative 320? What's going on here? Okay, well, we're on the x-axis, but what do these points mean?
Starting.
Okay, it's starting and ending, so this would be like, this is an arch, right? And so this is where the bottoms hopefully are touching on the ground. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I look here, this is the distance. So we're going out 320 feet this way and out 320 feet this way, okay? And then what's your height of the arch at these 2 points? 0, right? Okay, so you're going to, very basic sentence here. Just use your number.